So would everybody agree that we are our business? Yes? Yeah. So then if we are our business, then that means as human beings, our thoughts are going to create our way of being in the world, and then our environment reflects back what's inside of us. Would everybody agree with that thinking? Yes? Yeah? Oh, you're there you are. Yeah, so it's like if that's the case, then what we do in our business and what's unresolved in us in us will show up in our business. There's no doubt about that. Has anybody had that experience where they've noticed, what's unresolved in you shows up in your business? People who haven't had that experience, can you just have a show of hands who hasn't had that experience? Yeah, okay, so all of us. So there's an understanding in the room already that if we actually stay unresolved, then these patterns, these repeating patterns that we have, will continue to show up in our business. So if we look at our thoughts, now our thoughts, they come from from when we're about 1 to 7, 8, we don't have a filter of our own. We rely on the adults who are caring for us. So whatever environment we're living in, that's what we take in and becomes our world. So if we've got beautiful supporting parents and family, then we grow up with a good sense of self and a good sense of being valued. If on the other hand, we don't grow up with that, then we have a sense of ourself that is not valuable, that many stories that we can make up in our own minds. And that's how we then step into the world, and that's how we view the world. So when when we have these thoughts, it's like it becomes our way of being. We actually operate from, say it's a sense of not enoughness, then that's what we get. We get not enough everywhere in our world, in our personal life, in our business life. It just keeps showing back and like a mirror in our face all the time. I was 12 when I first attempted to kill myself and leave this planet. I hated being on this planet. I lived in a very violent home, and my sense of self was not very good. And that's how I saw the world. I loathed myself and I loathed everything that I engaged in, except I had refuge in animals and nature. So there was a place, even in the darkest places, where I could find some refuge. So then our environment can either be like a dump or it can smell really beautiful. And it depends on what's happening within us, as in what our environment looks like and how we see our environment. So for us, we would have 3-4 different views of what's happening in this moment. So the gold really is when we can actually connect to ourselves. I was listening to, what was his name? Tim, Longhurst, yes, the other night, Donna, and he was talking, he's a futurist, and he was speaking about the 3 divides, and it really struck me deeply, because this is the work that I do when I'm working with people. It's about reconnecting self to self, self to others, and then self to nature. And it was brilliant, and it's really been bubbling away in me about how we need to have this most special relationship back in our world, our relationship to ourself. Because if that is good and strong, then everything that happens in our world is good and strong. So these are some statistics. I mean, we can find plenty of statistics, but it costs about $12.6 billion a year in related costs to depression. There was a big study done, 4,000 people or something, in a corporate environment, and it showed about a third of each of the people who participated had some form of mental illness, whether depression, anxiety, stress. And for me, I think that's just incredible statistics, wouldn't you think? Yeah? Could all the people who had number 3, who I gave a number 3 to, please stand up in the room? So if you look around the room now and you think about 1 in 3 people has a mental illness, and I'm not saying these guys got mental illnesses, that's not why I picked you, okay? I didn't pick you for that. But it's just a show, it's just a physical expression of those statistics. So if you look amongst your friends and colleagues here, that's a lot of people, hey, that are really suffering and struggling. Just check that out. Yeah, have a seat. Thanks, guys. So tell me some of the signs that you think you would see in recognising that your mental health was declining. What would you expect to see?
Stop doing the things that you love.
Yep, stop doing things you love. I heard withdrawal from somewhere. Procrastinating, that's a good one, hey.
Alcohol consumption.
Alcohol, I did that very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Molly?
Workaholism.
Workaholism, any sort of addiction, absolutely.
Waking at about 2:30.
Sleep disturbances, absolutely. Next one,
Never
Leah.
wanting to have sex.
That's right. Well, the energy's going in different ways. Exactly, that's right. What happens when these symptoms come up? I see those as symptoms of unresolved trauma. That's how I look at it. So there's something unresolved, some trauma, and trauma doesn't have to be a big thing. Trauma shows up in many, many different ways. There's if you look up still face experiment on the internet, it's not very nice to watch, but it's a young child who's interacting with their mother. Gooing, garring, both smiling, beautiful. Then she turns away, and then when she comes back, she has a still face. And it doesn't take very long for that child to become distressed and disturbed. And that can be held in a child's body if the reconnection isn't good and positive. So it doesn't take much for us to create these negative patterns or understandings about ourselves in our lives. So trauma can be many things, and that's not said for any of you to feel guilty if you're a mother or father and didn't pay attention to your children, but we have to live. But trauma is a fact of life. Peter Levine says it's a fact of life, but it doesn't, however, have to be a life sentence. So these here I see as symptoms of trauma. So what happens, unfortunately, in the West mostly is people have these issues. They might go to their GP or professional, and then the symptom is managed. And for me, that really hurts my heart because there's a missed opportunity every time that happens for that person to understand the core issue and to heal the core issue of what's causing these symptoms. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Some of the challenges, do you recognise any of these challenges in small business? Who's done long hours? Yeah, who's fallen asleep at their desk? Or on the lounge with the computer on their lap? Yeah, yeah? Like Di said before, jack of all trades. Oh, I've got to do some jobs that I really hate accounting stuff. But it's like we have to do these jobs that we don't like instead of being with clients and helping clients all the time. We've got all this other stuff. Pressures to succeed. That's a good one because not always does everybody understand in our family and friends what it takes on this entrepreneurial journey. Would everybody agree with that? Yeah. They don't understand when we get to that goal, then we have this next desire to go wherever we're taking ourselves on our path. Cash flow, that's a good one, isn't it? Everybody got a money story? Yeah. My father was a very abusive man. And every now and then he would give us kids a little bit of money. So in my child mind, what I did was I made money equal love. So then imagine taking that into business. It doesn't work. At a subconscious level, it was in my way. It was excruciatingly painful in my body to accept money from someone else. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why. I never felt enough. I thought I had to study the next thing. I need to practice Ayurveda much more before I can actually take money from that. It was this cycle of just never being able to succeed financially in my business. Support. This group is amazing. I love this group, and there's other groups that I'm part of, but this gets us out of our singular environment, our isolation, and gets us into community. And trauma happens in disconnection. So whenever we disconnect, we're going back to that place that's familiar from our hurt self. And when we reconnect, we're doing a new movement. We're creating a new neural pathway. Blurring of boundaries. I had a client who had difficulty saying no, and she filled her business with clients that she wasn't happy with. Yeah. When she did her inner work, she realised that she collapsed into her child wounded self, and that was where the resentment was building up. And once she did her work, she's able to be very clear about who she wants to work with and serve. And it's funny, only those people come to her now. She doesn't even have to say no. What else have we got on? Isolation. I want to say one thing about isolation. Isolation, you can isolate negatively, where it's your pattern of withdrawing and coming into that darkness of yourself. Or isolation can be a great thing, where you use that to be your creative place. So it's about recognising whether it's harmful or whether it's helpful. So basically what I want to say here is like our thoughts are our seeds that we plant. Yep. Trauma is trapped in the body and it heals from the body. That's where the experience of overwhelm comes from. But what we pay attention to will grow, will be what flowers. So if we go back to the dump analogy, if we've got thoughts that are like that, we've got this great smelly mess. But if we actually nurture and can do our inner work, I can't tell you how important it is to do your inner work. If you do your inner work, then your environment looks like a garden, it's a forest, it's amazing. Yeah? And it doesn't mean that you don't still have to work, but the intensity of your experience is different, and you can recognise when you're in the old pattern. And the other thing that does happen that most people aren't aware of are the generational patterns. So generationally, if there's a disturbance in the system and it's not resolved, then down each generation comes whatever that person holds for the system. That can be dysfunctional, it can be addictions, it can be many, many things. But it's quite incredible how, and scientists are showing now that through their epigenetics, that things do get passed down generationally. So do the imbalances in a system. So underwhelming business results do happen, but they don't have to. If you commit to yourself to do your inner work, then your life will look different, your business will look different, everything in your world will look different. Yeah? So I want to invite you to pay attention to your inner world and start to create connection between self and others, then self and nature. And once you do that, and if we all did that, could you imagine the world that we would live in if we all were able to do that? It would look very different.